Hello, and welcome to the Gravel Ride podcast, where we go deep on the sport of gravel cycling through in-depth interviews with product designers, event organizers, and athletes who are pioneering the sport. I'm your host, Craig Dalton, a lifelong cyclist who discovered gravel cycling back in 2016 and made all the mistakes you don't need to make. I approach each episode as a beginner to unlock all the knowledge you need to become a great gravel cyclist. This week on the show, we welcome Swiss-based founder and rider Pius Kobler to the show to talk about his company Milkit and the system they've developed around tubeless tires and a brand new product that they've created to support that system in the form of a multi-tool. I happened to meet Pius on the trail on a group ride I went on last week as he was in town for Sea Otter Classic, and we got to chatting about his entrepreneurial journey and his rider-first perspective of design. And I thought it'd be great to have him on the show. And I was fortunate to grab him on a Friday night over in Switzerland to talk more about the company and the company's journey and some of the products I know you'll get value out of being aware of. I encourage you to check out some of the links on the show notes, as some of the nuances of the product design may be best seen in a video. If you're watching the video of the podcast, you'll see Pius reference and hold some of his products in his hands as part of the conversation, but detailed videos are available on the website, which is over at milkit.bike. Before we jump in, I do need to thank this week's sponsor, Hammerhead. Hammerhead and the Karoo 2 computer have been longtime sponsors of the show. As you know, the Karoo 2 is the most advanced GPS cycling computer available today, with industry-leading mapping, navigation, routing capabilities that set it apart from other GPS options out on the market. Over the course of my conversation with Pius, we talk a lot about rider-oriented design. Hammerhead and the team over at Karoo 2 definitely take that perspective, and they're constantly updating their products with bi-weekly software updates. There's nothing cooler to me on the Hammerhead Karoo 2 than getting that notification that a software update's available, because I know they're adding things that are going to be of interest to me, whether it's today or down the line. One of the biggest updates I received that I love is the climber feature, which has predictive path technology, which basically shows you what's ahead of you on a climb. While that may not necessarily be important on your daily routes, for me, when I'm doing an event or I've borrowed a route from someone that I've never done before, I'd love knowing, is this a short punchy climb ahead of me, or do I really need to settle in for a longer climb? For a limited time offer, our listeners can get a free heart rate monitor with the purchase of a Hammerhead Karoo 2. Simply visit hammerhead.io right now and use the promo code TheGravelRide at checkout to get yours today. This is an exclusive limited time offer, so don't forget to use the promo code TheGravelRide. Simply add that heart rate monitor strap to your purchase cart when you're checking out on the e-commerce system at hammerhead.io. Use the promo code TheGravelRide, and that heart rate monitor will be yours for free. With that said, let's jump right into my conversation with Pius Kobler. Pius, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You have the honor of being our first Swiss guest.
Oh, I'm very honored, yeah.
And how cool was it that we got to ride together last week?
How cool is it that we see each other like 3 days later across an ocean, yeah?
Yeah, I love it. You know, I as I mentioned to you on that ride, I'd been familiar with the Milkit brand and some of the products specific to the tire sealant solution for a number of years. But I'm curious to kind of just step back and learn a little bit more about you and then the formation of the company. Because as the listener of this podcast knows, like, I'm super keen on the entrepreneurial ideas and journey as an entrepreneur myself. So let's start off by kind of where you grew up and how you discovered the bike, and then we'll get into how you decided to form this company.
Yeah. I grew up in Switzerland, and I was always a cyclist. Like, I cycled to school. What's that? 12 miles every day, 2 ways. So
Oh, wow.
when I was 14 or so. So yeah, and then with my family, we always went on bike trips in holidays. I literally grew up on bikes, more or less. But then mountain biking came quite late. I started mechanical engineering at ETH Zurich here. And after studying, I took my recumbent and rode it from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego for 1.5 years. So I've been cycling a bit.
You spent some time on a bike, I see.
Yeah, I was in the Bay Area earlier already, passing through. Yeah, and
That's interesting. You know, it's funny when you even mention the word recumbent as a style of bicycle. That's in my mind, that's such an engineering type vehicle. Why
It's
did
the
you choose to
perfect,
tour on
it's
that?
the perfect nerd impersonification that you can have. Sometimes, as in the US, it was most fun. We were getting off the recumbent, and people go, "Oh, but you're not handicapped. Why would you? Why are you riding one of these?"
Yeah, and
It's
and not to derail the conversation too much, but from an engineering perspective, is riding a recumbent sort of mechanically or aerodynamically better for long distances than other style bikes?
There is no doubt. No, it's so
Really?
much for long distances. There is no discussion actually, but nobody knows, and everybody thinks that they can't be good because then more people will be doing it. You you don't have any pain in your wrists, neck, butt, wherever. You have a relaxed sitting position. You have a third less wind drag. You have several of these advantages. You have a lower center of gravity, you have a much better curve stability, you have a longer wheelbase, more stability. But then the main factor for me is you have a completely different way of sitting on the bike. It's not You're not sitting like this and staring on the road in front of you. You're sitting like this, open. You're like on a couch riding through the countryside. It's for traveling by far the best, but I would never use it in a city or so. Like daily life, I don't have one. I
Yeah,
sold it after I traveled.
that's so interesting yet so off topic for this
Yeah,
podcast.
this was the perfectly wrong start for this for this episode.
Right. And then, I feel like now there's this potential that a listener is imagining you being some nerdy bike nerd on a recumbent. Yet my interaction with you was on a mountain bike where you tackled every complicated chute that we came in
Riding the
front of on
coolest
Mount Tam.
ridge in, yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly.
Great. Okay, so we've established engineering degree. We've established you spent a lot of time on a bike. There's a big leap before between getting an engineering degree and obviously looking at bicycles from a mechanical engineering perspective, and then starting a company. What was the journey like to that point?
Yeah, basically, when I came back, I haven't done kind of performance cycling. It was always holiday or work or whatever, traveling. But when I came back, I was in okay shape, let's say, and a buddy of mine was in mountain biking, so I joined him for some longer rides, and that's how I got into mountain biking only after I did that trip. And
Gotcha.
basically I started working. That's the coincidence that led to things. I started working in a company that it's a design bureau. You could say they do product development and design as a service for larger companies. You could say we were professional inventors, and we were developing products for many companies in the bike industry as well. Like we were working for Scott, for BMC, for these brands here in Switzerland, among others. And we were a group of bikers in that company. So one thing led to another, and what made the the deciding point for to go into tubeless was basically I a bit later, after that long trip, I had the chance to take an unpaid leave for 8 weeks and go to the US, buy a van, and drive it from one IMBA epic ride to the other for 8 weeks, which was amazing. I might have
Yeah,
ridden more trails in the US than most Americans, you could say.
I bet you have.
Yeah. No, that was really good. But the not so smart part about it is we were going to Colorado and Utah in July, which is not the right moment. It's like 120 degrees or so over there. So it was a bit warmer than we were used to. And we ended up with a flat because our tubeless tires were completely dried out because it was so warm. And
Yeah.
so I'm in the middle of nowhere, somewhere on the Continental Divide in Colorado, with that dried out tire, putting a tube in. What everybody hates when you ride tubeless, to take the whole thing apart and put a tube in. And that's when I started thinking. I had a few weeks more to go, and which means a lot of time to think. And I said, wait, if I'm me as a bike freak and tech developer, like if I have this problem of not being able to maintain my sealant, how should other people do it? And
And when you thought
that's
about that problem, Pius, was, if I'm articulating this correctly, the problem was you just weren't aware of the level of sealant that was remaining in the tire. You
I
had
had
gone to
no
this
idea.
hotter,
I had
yeah,
no idea that it was just drying up faster because it was a bit warmer.
yeah. I encourage like everyone listening right now, think about your bike, think about the sealant, and think if you have any idea whether there's enough sealant in there or not. I can guarantee, looking around my garage right now, I would say 80% of the bikes I have, they have to be bone dry. It's like without a question. But I don't know. And I'm a bit lazy to find out, right? Like it's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But to your point, you get out there and you have the situation where sealant is a godsend, right? It seals that hole and it's not there. That's a problem.
hmm Yeah, that's basically we say if you split up bikers into people that ride tubeless and don't, then the ones who ride tubeless, you can basically split them up into the ones who know that you have to maintain it and the ones who don't know and find it out a bit later. And then the ones who know how to they have to maintain it. A good part of those things, yeah, I'm always feeling a bit of sealant in, and it's fine. But the not so big part know that they should look at what's inside, like they should check the old sealant or get it out before they push in the new one, so you have a really good working sealant in there.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, so you sort
that's
of
the challenge.
recognize this problem, which when you articulate it is pretty obvious, I think, to us all, right? No one wants to look inside their tires. What's the solution? How do you go about solving that problem?
Yeah, that was as often in product development, it was a step-by-step process where first we had the idea we need to drill a second hole into the rim to somehow look in there and then refill through the valve, and then eventually wait, no, we are not going to have a second hole. We have to make it through the hole that's already there. So eventually we were going through the valve, but then we still had a because the first thing you think about is a dipstick. You need to go in and check the sealant and then you fill.
Yeah.
And then by coincidence, like by using it, by having prototypes, you realized, wait, and maybe at this point I should explain the whole valve. Basically what we do is we have a normal tubeless valve that you install into the rim like any tubeless valve, but at the bottom, the at the bottom of the rubber foot, the rubber is closed and it's
Yeah.
slit into rubber flaps. So when you unscrew the valve core, the the air stays in the tire because these rubber flaps at the bottom are closed. And now we
Yeah.
have a syringe, kind of a syringe and needle with a flexible extension and then the sealant regulator that you connect together. And
Let's
with
take a
this,
pause for 1 second, P.S. And just so the listener understands. So, if you can imagine that your normal valve core for tubeless, you've got a section that is inside the rim, and obviously the section you see outside the rim. And what you've described and shown to people who are on the video, you've got sort of on that inside piece a rubber gasket that its natural state is to be closed. So, if you're not pushing air or something else through it, nothing's coming back through it, no air's coming back through it, etc. And
like
then you've
the
yeah,
ketchup bottles, you have the
yeah,
ketchup bottles that have these flaps on the top. That's the
yeah.
function more or less we have.
I love it. I
Yeah,
love it. Taking a commonplace design concept and putting it in something technical on the bike. So
exactly,
then
exactly.
you just had picked up this syringe, and some people are used to using just sort of their bottle of sealant and pouring it directly into the tire. Some years ago, I started adopting the syringe for more precise measurement and the ability to insert through the valve core. It's possible in a standard valve core to do that, but it's kind of difficult in a number of ways, which I think you'll get into in describing the value of having that seal on the inside of the valve and how that interacts with the sort of plunger, if you will. I don't know if that's going to be the right term, that's attached
Yeah.
to the syringe.
Yeah, like the wording is the part inside the inside the tire, inside the rim, we call it rubber foot, and then you have the aluminum part that you screw onto the rim, that's the valve stem, and then you have the valve core that goes into the valve stem, and we remove the valve core, and the air is still the tire remains pressurized because the rubber flaps are closed. And
Yeah.
now the trick is that with this needle here that we have connected to the syringe, you can push through the rubber flaps into the tire with the air pressure still being in the tire. That's the core of our technology. Because now you with the needle you go to the bottom of the tire. The sealant has accumulated at the bottom of the tire. And now basically all you have to do is you open the sealant regulator, and the air pressure in the tire is pushing the sealant into your syringe. You don't even have to suck it out. It's pushing out. It's automatically flowing into your syringe.
Yeah,
And
that was a point you had made to me on the trail the other day, which was the aha moment for me. Because when you first described the mechanism, I was like, "Oh, that's great." You push the syringe kind of legs into that the bottom of your tire, and you can touch the sealant. But that nuance there, that since you've left the air in the tire, you have air pressure, which you can then draw out the sealant into the tube with the air pressure pushing it effectively
yeah,
into the syringe, and you can see the exact measurement of what remains in the tire at that point.
and the main reason back in the days when we invented this, the main reason why it was important to have the pressure remain in the tire is when you released the air from the tire back then, the tire would fall back into your rim, and then you would have trouble inflating it again. Nowadays, this is becoming better because you have these rims where the tire stays outside when you deflate it, but it's still a cool feature to not breaking the bead, to not losing any sealant, not having some sealant getting out on the side, and it's just literally more fun doing a tubeless maintenance. If you go in, it comes out automatically, and you just push it back. So once you've extracted that sealant, you see how much was left. So you might realize, oh, that wasn't much left, and this looks bad. I'm gonna throw this off. So you disconnect the syringe, you throw it out, or you just top it up with new one. And then what you do is you push against the tire pressure, you push the sealant back into the tire with your syringe. And that
Yeah.
was the original idea, to be able to measure and refill the sealant in a minute or two without a drop spilled,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
literally our claim. You can install a tubeless tire and maintain it without ever seeing a drop of sealant.
And that to me is a godsend when I sort of think about my process for updating tires and sealant and whatnot. Like, I think I in my mind it's so laborious that I don't even want to do it. And that's exactly the bad it's exactly a bad approach, because that's why 80% of my tires are bone dry right now.
Yeah, yeah, that's the challenge. That's our chance with what we do, and it's our challenge at the same time.
Yeah.
We really solve something, that hassle that people have, but still we have so many customers that we don't get to sell our product because they haven't started looking into it yet, even.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's definitely like a journey that I went on, which was like, first I had a good friend who would help me every time I needed to change or put sealant in the tire, and he would handle it. Then I got some of the tools myself, particularly an inflator, like a booster to help seal the tire. But still to this day, like the maintenance of it is beyond me, and I am super keen to get these installed on my bike just so I can be more diligent about checking the sealant, particularly when I go off to events and it's been, 3 4 months between checking, and I'm concerned, do I have any sealant in there in a day, or, a big mountain adventure that really counts? I want to know and be confident that I have the sealant I need.
It's actually interesting you saying that, because that's my answer when people ask us, how often do I have to do I have to check my sealant? And my answer is that I can't give you a number. No way I can give you a time span, because the guy riding in Mexico summer, or in, let's say, Utah in summer, riding every day, having his bike in a shed in the heat, that guy and the other guy in Montana riding a maybe double ply downhill tire or something
Yeah.
every second week, that's two completely different cases. The one has to measure 4 times more often than the other. And what we say is exactly what you just said. Measure your sealant before an important race, before a weekend with your buddies, before you go to the holidays. Just do the check quickly, and you have the peace of mind. My tubular system is going to be perfect for that
Yeah.
occasion. And because you do that, you'll eventually realize, oh, my system with that setup every 3 4 months is fine, and another will see, oh shit, I have to do this every second month.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So as you guys have designed the product and brought it to manufacturing, where did you end up manufacturing this product?
Oh, that's one of these startup stories, you know. We literally started in the south of Switzerland, to the Italian border, where you get Italian manufacturing pricing, and across the border some legal opportunities. Like, it was just easier to be in Switzerland, and that worked well from the, let's say, from the quality perspective, but then logistics and organization were, um, how to not be unpolite, um, towards Italians. It wasn't optimal, and then we did some risk diversification, where we went to the future of cycling industry in Europe, which is Portugal, which might be true, but only if you really know what you're doing when you're sourcing a manufacturing partner, which we didn't entirely know back then. So we ran into quality problems, which actually led to one of the darkest hours of our startup. I'm going to come to the booster, to our inflator. We had a
Yeah.
recall on that product just after releasing it, because of some quality problems in production. You can imagine
Yeah.
how that feels when you release your second product as a startup, and you're going to recall it from everywhere. So that led us to basically learn the lesson, and say, when you're an early stage startup, it's so much more important that it works, that you have a production that works. The price, the 20% more cost for your product, doesn't matter in the beginning. And we went to Germany, and we are still in Germany, because having a reliable system, having a production that you can just rely on, is up till today super important. And we are now stretching out towards other regions, because the numbers are getting higher. But for a long time, you better go for reliable than for cheap.
Yeah,
That's for
yeah, for
sure.
sure, for sure. And I can definitely commiserate with that hardware development and production journey that you just described. Just so everyone understands, when was the company first founded? What year?
Um, Basically, that trip to the US was in 13, summer 13.
Okay.
Then the original idea was to, that job that I had at that product developing company was really cool. So I was perfectly happy there. And the idea was to develop the whole system and sell it in an online store besides working there.
Yeah.
Which sounds a bit naive now looking back, but that was the original plan. And step by step, we realized, no, 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 you have to do this properly, or there is no chance. And so
Yeah.
in summer 14, I quit my job there and started bootstrapping. We in Switzerland, you have, let's say, not so optimal investment environment, like in especially in the Bay Area and in the US in general. But what's very good is the startup support ecosystem. Like, you have
Okay.
many coaching programs and prizes, and we were lucky enough to win some startup prizes because the story was good, and I had a co-founder who already had started a startup before, and I was this ETH engineer bike guy, so that was a good mix. And that's basically how we started bootstrapping. And then in 2015 we started the company and did raised a financing round to get production started and everything. That
Yeah.
there was capital needed for that.
Yeah. It's such a hard business. Any business that involves inventory, there's just so much additional risk beyond your own personal sacrifice and time to get the business up and running.
And that's where you're from the very beginning in how to say, you're not perfectly independent from the very beginning, because you already have your shareholders that you have to justify always what you're doing,
Yeah.
so the pressure
Yeah.
is on from the first minute, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So we went through sort of the valve system, and then you just mentioned the booster, and I think the booster actually is where I first came encountered the brand. So can you describe the what the functionality of a booster is? What does it do for a rider? Because I imagine many people don't have that type of product.
Yeah, maybe let me just quickly finish the valve system there.
Sure.
The original idea was to do that measuring and the refilling, which is still one of the major USPs. But then that's also a nice story. One day I was installing a tire. You remove the valve core because you need a good airflow. I inflated the tire, and literally I was, but the air wasn't coming out because I was holding my. Usually, you hold your finger on the valve stem,
Yeah.
and then really quickly you screw your valve core back.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that, and then I realized the air isn't coming out. That's how we basically invented or realized our second big USP is the air stays inside. You have like a one-way valve with these rubber flaps. So well, it changes the whole installation of a tubeless tire, where whereas normally you nowadays you fill in the sealant into the tire, then you push the tire onto your rim, then you inflate it, and while popping it, some sealant is spilling over. That's the messy part when you're inflating a tire. With our valves, you take the valve core out, you have the full airflow, and the tire, you do that without sealant in the tire. So you have a dry installing of the tire, and once it sits well, then you take the syringe and add the sealant into the already
Yeah.
installed tire. So that's the no drop spilled part is with the installation also, because you do that new sequence of installing. And then the third big advantage is the rubber flaps are closed at the bottom. That means no sealant gets to the valve core, which means you don't have
Yeah.
the clogged valve cores anymore. You can release the air reliably.
Yeah, that's my other embarrassing situation. On one of my wheels right now, I can literally remove the valve core and no air will come out.
It's
I've got
completely
a
clogged.
I've got
Yeah.
to, I've got to jam a very tiny Allen key in there to pop it open, and even then it just trickles out.
Yeah. So that's basically the three major USBs of the valve system that yeah
Yeah.
summarizes
Yeah,
it.
there's a ton of nuance in this, and I definitely encourage people to go to your website because you've got detailed videos on
Mm-hmm.
how it plays out. But is very thoughtfully designed, and those small benefits add up to what we were talking before. It just means you're going to address your sealant more frequently. You're not going to have any trepidation. You're going to know exactly what's going on in those key moments and days when you need to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then basically having that problem solved, we went to, each year we go to Finale Ligure, famous riding place by the sea there in Italy, and we one of us had a problem with the tire. We needed to change a tire. So in the evening, we're in the shed there trying to change a tire. We have a floor pump, but nothing else. And the tire wouldn't sit. And so we say we're product developers. We're these tech freaks. So we say let's do a ghetto booster. The one with the big Coke bottle. You take a Coke bottle, you drill a hole into the cap, you install a bike valve, and then you drill a second hole, and you have a piece of tube, and you kink it. That's how you hold the air. Then you inflate it, and then you hold it on the valve, and that's the ghetto booster, you know. And
I love
we
talking to engineers.
and we nearly managed to inflate, like we managed to inflate the tire, but it wouldn't hold. So we
Yeah.
just didn't get there, and so we had to drive to the gas station to use the compressor, and that's how we got the tire installed. And that's when we said this is another problem that we have to address. And basically we professionalized the ghetto booster, and what it turned out to be is it's now not a PET plastic bottle, but it's an aluminum drinking bottle that you basically you have that head that you screw on your bottle. It's a plastic part that you screw on the bottle. You get the bottle with a drinking cap, so you can actually use it as a drinking bottle, which uh, being in a gravel podcast is very interesting for backpacking. You know, some people going to really remote areas might
Yeah.
be interested in. Generally, this isn't the story of it being so portable because it's a water bottle. It's a nice story, and media love to write about it. But this is a product that you have in your workshop normally, or in your pickup
Yeah.
by the trailhead or something like that, or going to a holiday like we in Italy. It's perfectly light and inexpensive, so it's a good product to have with you. But and the bike packing, like the remote part, is for some an interesting part as well. So basically, it's this plastic part that you screw on the bottle. You have a bicycle valve core that allows you to inflate the whole thing up to 160 psi, which is
Yeah.
a lot, but 120 psi is just fine. And then
Yeah.
it has a little opening and a slider inside. Uh, So you basically push the head onto your valve stem, and the slider inside opens, and all the air rushes into your tire.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the because there is no hose, that's a bit of tech details here. In a hose you lose a lot of pressure, so because there is no hose you have all the pressure right by the valves, and that means it it is instant, like it's an explosion.
Yeah.
We call it the booster effect. When I do the live presentation and I push that booster on the wheel, I look into the faces of people because it's so funny to see, holy shit, that was really fast. So that's the
Yeah.
booster effect.
And I think that's the key. And again, just to kind of come back in case it's unclear, you've got kind of this aluminum water bottle with a cap that you can screw into it. You then attach your home pump up, which pressurizes all the air in that canister, and then much like uh, a cartridge when you're inflating your tire, you're just putting it onto the valve core where you've removed the tip of the valve core. You're putting it onto the valve, and it's spitting very quickly a burst of air, which for the uninitiated, that's what's required to push the bead out to the side of the tire and get it into that locked and secured position that you need. And that's what you generally cannot achieve just with a floor pump. You need that
Because
pressure
you
and that burst.
you don't have a tube inside, and the air is just escaping between the tire and the rim. So if you're slowly pumping, the tire is not moving. So you need that fast push of air to push the tire out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you do not have one of these in your garage, go out and get one today. It is like indispensable, in my opinion,
The
for
frustration potential is very high
yeah.
to trying to sometimes you're lucky and you can do it with the floor pump, and if you're not lucky, it's very frustrating.
And then I used to go to the gas station and I could never get adequate pressure out of those gas station
Yeah.
versions. So when I got
And
this product first, I was like, I'm now fully capable to change
and
tires, install new
the
tires.
the cool thing is it's a small bottle, you know. It's 20 ounces and 34 ounces, the sizes we have. This is not a lot of volume, but because it's so fast flowing, because it makes it very efficient, it doesn't matter how long the air flows, it matters how much air flows in 1 second, you know. That's when the tire
Yeah.
is pushed outside. And that's why with this booster you can, if you can't inflate the tire with this booster, then you have a problem. Then even the compressor doesn't deliver as much air in a second like the
Yeah.
booster, you know.
So
yeah.
you just mentioned you have two different sizes for, typical gravel cyclist, maybe a 700 by 40. Is there a product size that you'd recommend?
Basically, talking about the US, we only have the big, the 34 version
Yeah.
available over there. The older, smaller version is basically not going to be continued. There are some still available in Europe, but yeah, the 32, 34, 32 version is just fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I think in my mind, the bigger, the better, right? If you've got that pressure, it's just going to make sure you only need to do it once and you get the tire seated the way you want.
hmm Yeah, there is an interesting story about that booster effect. Um, I was at Sea Other some 4 years ago or so, and I was doing that booster live presentation, and a guy from Bike Magazine comes to see, and I do the presentation. I look into his face when I present the booster, and he goes literally, "Holy shit! This was so cool. Can you do this again? I need to shoot the video." So he takes his mobile phone, shoots a video of me screwing the thing together, inflating it, pushing it on, pulling it off. And because our valves played together nicely with the booster, because you push the booster on without the valve core, you pull it off, and the air stays inside because of the rubber flaps. You can use it with
Yep.
any Presto valve, with ours, you have that advantage. And so he does a video of that sequence. He puts it on their Facebook, and now, what would you say? What would you impress you as a view count of that video a year later?
A million.
That would be pretty impressive. You're good because many people say, "Oh, 100,000 would be really much." It was 3.2 million a year later, and now it's at 8.6 million views.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
I'm telling that story because the whole tubeless story, as we were talking, it's something that you don't really want to touch. You don't really want to look into it. You don't really want to be talking about. But then there is a lot of interest around it. People,
Yeah.
many people realize that the topic is there, and it's kind of they have to look into it. So reaching that number is kind of a sign
Yeah.
how important that topic is.
I think it's just a huge unlock. And to your point, like there's countless people who leave the bike shop with tubeless installed already and don't think about it, don't understand it, don't know about it. And the minute they have to deal with their tire, they're completely ill equipped to address it.
Oh, that's another good point. I mean, the reason why we met is because we were at Sea Other. We basically go to Sea Other, and then we go a bit of riding once we're over there. At Sea Other this year, my key learning was I was talking to many brand managers of bike brands, and they love our system. They know what it does, and I say, okay, let's look into how we can equip this with your bikes. And they say, yeah, the thing is, especially US customers, and that's interesting. In the US, things even more than in Europe, they have to be easy. It has to be easy and simple. And when they sell a bike, they want to make the sale quick and easy and nice. It has to be a nice experience. So what they don't want to do is talk about some tech things, tubeless, when they sell a bike, quite understandably. But that also means they send the customer home with 100% sure problem that they're gonna have, if
Yeah.
they convert it to tubeless. So it's a paradox, really. They
Yeah.
don't want to talk about it, but they should absolutely somehow talk about it.
Yeah, that's why I'm sort of pleased to do this episode with you and just dig in a little bit deeper because, again, it's easy for most riders to just forget and not think about it. But when you get to a product that's really thoughtfully designed around a solution, like it's a really nice thing to have on your bike and a really nice thing to have in your garage.
And I mean, that's exactly, you can literally, if you're the right kind of person, let's say, it can be fun maintaining your tubeless after a while. Like, I'm so used to it. I like doing it because it's so quick and so easy. It's satisfying of
Yeah,
doing it so quickly. But then obviously, still, even with our products, tubeless is not for everyone. You know that there's people who just won't ever do that, which is fine.
Yeah.
And for them, it's good for the mechanic. You know, for the shop where they bring it in, the shop can install the valves and then can do a much quicker job when the customer brings the bike in. In a minute, they have the
Yeah.
tubeless check done.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, continuing on the kind of product journey chronologically, where are you at now? Are there additional products in the product line?
Yeah. So the the plan was from the beginning to the booster and the valve cord and the valve system. That's basically what we call our backbone products. That's also what we have patented. And the idea was to build the brand on these unique products and then be able to sell consumables like a rim tape and sealant, which we do. I don't have to go too much into the rim tape, even though rim tape is one of the biggest factor of frustration in tubeless. Everybody who has installed a rim tape and it wasn't tight, and then take the whole thing apart again, monster
Yeah.
frustration, you know. So our rim tape does a really good job because it has a pressure activated glue. It seals more reliably. It's very strong, but let's not go into too much detail here. The more interesting part is the sealant, where the idea was to with the brand be able to sell a sealant, but now the sealant has become its own sales driver because we have a different approach to the sealant where, oops, I'm I'm saying it fulfills it checks all the boxes that a modern sealant has to fulfill, like wide temperature range, um, environmental friendly. It's water based. It comes in 100% recycled CO2 bottles. It's a natural. It's synthetic latex. Doesn't contain ammonia. Doesn't contain aggressive ingredients. So it's CO2 proof. That's a big plus as well. It checks all these boxes. But then what makes it really different is, as you can see here, or the ones who don't see it, there is no particles at the bottom of the bottle when you turn the bottle around. That accumulation, and then you have to shake it to get these particles, these crystals into solution. That you don't have to do that with our sealant anymore. It just is in solution. So you just take with the syringe, you push it into your tire without a hurry, like shaking the bottle and then really quickly fill it in because you might not get the right amount of particles in there. That's not a thing anymore. But then, more importantly, it stays homogeneous also in the tire, which means you don't have this separation where you have these rubbery leftovers, rubber balls, it's called sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't have this separation into rubbery leftovers and watery leftovers, but it stays constant, it stays homogeneous over time. So that leads to a longer, more reliable function.
Yeah, I've seen those rubber balls in certain tires when I've taken them off. So I know that effectively that's dried up material, so it's not going to act as a sealant,
Yeah.
presumably. And if I'm hearing you correctly, by the way your product is blended and stays consistent, doesn't need shaking, like as long as there's solution in the tire, it will function as designed versus something that's separated into elements that need to be combined in order to work.
Oh, some of the well-known sealants, if you wait a bit too long and you open the tire, you have basically a puddle of water, like brownish, greenish, watery thing left over, which is not sealant at all anymore.
Yeah.
It has not been working for quite a while, and our sealant remains homogeneous, and it covers, like, the tire looks the same one day or a year after installing it. It's just covered like wet from the sealant, which is important.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't accumulate. It doesn't leave these add these rubbery leftovers. And we have it nicely printed on our bottle here, on our sealant bottle. We won the sealant test in this larger bike magazine here. I always say we won by a bit, just a bit better than the others from function, sealing function. But I
Yeah.
say if they'd done the test 2 months later, we would have won by a big margin, because it's still working more constantly. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's a big advantage. And the third advantage of it staying homogeneous, and that's very important for users, is it doesn't go bad in the bottle because it stays stable, homogeneous.
Yeah.
You don't have to throw the bottle away after half a year or to a year, something like that, because it goes bad in the bottle. So there is no separation in the bottle as well, which
Yeah.
in the end is a quite an environmental impact. A lot of sealant being thrown away, and it's a financial aspect as well. You,
Yeah.
you, you can buy a bigger bottle and use it next year.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is nice.
So that being
Amazing.
said, the sealant is not just a sealant that we also sell with our brand like we planned originally. It's really a game changer. And talking about gravel, we this is originally, we come from the mountain bike sector. The whole tubeless comes from the mountain bike sector originally. But now with gravel and road coming, the challenges are different for sealants, and there is two major differences. One, with the higher pressures, you have a lot more water loss. Sealants dry up because tires are porous and tires are never perfectly tight, so you lose water through any tire. And in a gravel or road bike, because the pressure is higher, you lose water faster, so it dries up faster than a mountain bike tire. And
Got
that's
it.
why we are gonna actually, now in May, we're gonna release our road and gravel sealant, which is a bit thinner, and it's longer lasting. So that's the one thing we adjusted, and the other thing is it seals cuts better at high pressures. So that's
Okay.
because sealing at high pressures is obviously a big challenge for sealants. The
Yeah.
higher the pressure, the more difficult. So we've adjusted our formula to cover these two important factors for gravelers and roadies.
Interesting. I'm excited to see that as it's tested out. But
Yeah,
I love that you're thinking kind of from first principles and thinking about the tire pressure differences and how they'll play out and affect the product.
yeah.
And now going to your latest product that I think you just released at Sea Otter, and I was able to see last weekend when we rode. Tell me about the journey to creating a multi-tool. And obviously, it's a category everybody's familiar with. Everybody has had one or many over the years. Like, what was the design perspective that you came to achieve this product? And then we can get into how cleverly it was executed and the multitude of functions you have built into it.
Basically, the approach is the same as with any of the products that we brought. There is still some trouble left, some things to solve. And what was missing for us is there are cuts in the tire that are too big to be sealed by the sealant, and that's when you need a plug solution. You need to push something through that hole or slit from the outside, to mechanically close that hole, and then the sealant can do the job to close off the rest. And so we knew, we've known for a long time that we have to bring some kind of a plug solution. We just never really knew where to put it and how to store it. You can go into the handlebar, you can go into the stem, you can go somewhere. What's really popular now, and this is a really hot topic in any bike segment, is having it quickly accessible. Having a solution for
Yeah.
in the backpack or somewhere, that's not really a solution that you want to offer today. So it has to be quickly accessible. You might still have your finger on the hole, because what you can do is, you're losing air, you hold the finger on your hole, so you can stop the air leak, and then you have one hand left, and you have to grab that tool with one hand very quickly. And so it has to be somewhere. And we didn't want to go into the handlebar or in the stem, because you have a lot of compatibility issues. So what we decided to do is we we want to go to that formerly bottle cage interface. We call it standard interface now, because there is sometimes like 3 or 4 on a bike, or at least 2. So we basically have a small box that you can screw onto your frame using this screw interface. And the the original idea of having these plugs is you have a rubber cover that you can open on the side, and then you can pull out that handle with the plug right there. So literally with one hand you can open the thing and pull the plug out and then push it in.
Yeah.
And we have, that's maybe a bit too detailed, but we have a side loading fork that makes it easier to load the plug into your fork tool. We have a twist shape of the fork tool because when the plug is twisted, when you push it into the tire, when you pull the tool out, the plug sticks better in the tire. Some details
Yeah.
about using that plug. And so this was basically the tool that we had to bring, that we wanted to bring out. But then we said, now that we have this presence on the bike frame, now that we have this box anyway, we are adding something that anybody needs anyway, and that's that it's a little multi-tool.
Yeah.
And what I'm holding into the camera now, for the ones who don't see it, it's a like an Allen key. It's a L-shaped Allen key, and it has on the sides, it has a bit-in-bit technology. So the small bits are stored in the larger bits, and you can magnetically remove them, flip them around, and put them back. So, and
Yeah.
on both sides, on the long side and on the short side, you can exchange these bits. And this makes from one Allen key that is super lightweight, let's say, compared to a folding tool with all these functions, you have a proper tool that you have a lot of torque and a good accessibility, and you have 8 functions. You have from 2 to 8 millimeter all Allen keys, plus you have a Torx 25, all in one tool. And that's a very attractive solution that you have right at the front. You know, you open that rubber cover, you pull that tool out, and you're ready to go. You need that often. I just
Yeah.
went riding for 4 days over Easter. I used it 9 times in 4 days, and I didn't use it because I wanted to count higher. So literally to tighten the axle of the wheel, the handlebar was twisted. I had to put my seat post a bit higher. You need very often you need to adjust or
Yeah.
tighten something. So this is very handy to have it quickly available. And then,
Interesting. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry. This is basically level one usability. Use that tool often, but then this tool clips magnetically into a tire lever. This is
Okay.
like people have to go online to see the form factor. This is the impressive part. You know how that L-shaped tool is clipping into the tire lever, where you have a chain link storage, and then you have a chain breaker that clips into the chain breaker, into the
Yeah.
tire lever. So it's all compactly stored together. And then the last thing that we added is there was some more space, so we added a little cutter tool, a little Swiss Army knife scissors tool that you can open, and then it has this cutting function. This is pretty fun tool as well, and it's also the storage for your replacement plugs. So
Yeah.
in short, it's a very compact way of having many solutions. The main solutions that you need, the tools in a small box that's super lightweight, 135 grams, which is, let me check how many
I think
ounces is
even in the
that.
US, we think about grams when
Yeah.
we think about bike parts,
Oh, we say
but
lighter than your phone. It's lighter than your mobile phone. So yeah.
that makes sense. And you mentioned this. I mean, and calling it like the shape of a deck of cards is not completely accurate because it's thinner than that, and a lot less weight, as you said. So you mentioned you've got the ability to both mount it to where any water bottles would have been mounted, and if I'm correct, you also have a way of strapping it to the bike. Is that
Exactly.
correct?
That's basically now we have that box, and you screw that box onto your frame with 2 screws, and basically with the 2 screws we also screw this interface on top. It's like an aluminum bar. It's a sliding interface that's also on the side of the kit. So you have two of these interfaces, and now you have what we call a strap clip. It's a plastic part that you can slide onto that interface, and then you have a Velcro strap where you can attach your pump, your CO2 cartridge, your tube, your banana, whatever you want to bring along. And the idea is to have one clip on each of these items. So before you ride, you decide, oh, today I need a pump. You slide it on. Today I need to bring my tube, and you slide it on. And sometimes you go without anything. So you have a modular system with these
Yeah.
interfaces around your base box.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super slickly designed. And as you articulated, like everything kind of nestles into one another.
Yeah.
And I like the thoughtfulness around the plug is the thing you want to access quickly, fast, and ideally with one hand, and making that kind of first and foremost in the design. And then if you need to dig out some of the other tools, they're all right there, but they're not as quickly accessible because you've erred towards what you need on the go fast.
Yeah. And maybe to finish that, the top interface that is held in place by the two screws, you can leave the interface away and just put your bottle cage on top of the whole kit. And that's actually the primary idea. You have that, it's so small, it's only half an inch thick, you know?
Yeah.
So you have half an inch under your bottle cage, and it basically disappears under your bottle cage, but
Yeah.
you can still access it from the side, and you can still slide your pump or whatever to the side with your bottle being on top. That's the core idea of that kit.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that, because when I saw it on your bike over the weekend, you did not have a bottle cage on top of it.
Because then
So
nobody would
that
see it, you know?
I love it. Good guerrilla marketing.
It worked. I'm here.
Exactly. Well, this was amazing. I'm so glad that I met you and ran into you. Like I said, I've been familiar with the brand. You guys have been doing it for quite some time now, and great to kind of just dig into both your history as a product designer, how you always design from a rider first perspective, and just hearing the totality of the systems you've built and the thought behind it. It was a real pleasure to get to know you. And I hope for the listeners, they hit up milkit.bike. I'll include that link in the show notes so everybody can see some of the videos and cool graphics that you have on the site to understand everything you've been describing.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Gravel Ride podcast. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with PS as much as I did. How fortunate was it that I was able to run into him on the trail, and how interesting a journey he had to creating the Milkit brand and the valve core system and the entire system that he described. Super happy to have made his acquaintance and get to know those products. A big thank you goes out to our friends at Hammerhead and the Hammerhead Karoo 2 computer. Remember, if you visit hammerhead.io and use the code TheGravelRide, you can get a free heart rate monitor strap with your purchase of that Karoo 2 computer. If you're interested in giving me any feedback on the show or connecting with other gravel cyclists around the world, I encourage you to join the Ridership. That's www.theridership.com. Everything's for free, and it's simply a forum that allows you to connect with other athletes around the world. If you're able to support the show, please visit buymeacoffee.com/thegravelride, or ratings and reviews are hugely helpful in getting this podcast in front of new listeners. Until next time, here's to finding some dirt under your wheels.